The stage is set in Germany for the 48th G7 meetings. Now, most world leaders have arrived, and like most high-stakes summits, the Ukraine-Russia war is expected to dominate the talks. The latest Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi landed in Munich. This is Prime Minister Narendra Modi's second trip to Germany in 2 months. In May, he visited the country for the 6th edition of the India-Germany Intergovernmental Consultations. He is expected to hold bilateral meetings with other G7 leaders. US President Joe Biden also reached the host country. He is on a 5-day trip to Europe. Biden will first attend the meeting of the Group of Seven, where he is expected to lead economic powers in the Bavarian Alps. And later, he is set to travel to Madrid for a summit with leaders of the 30 NATO countries. Joe Biden also held a bilateral with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. The two leaders vowed to stay united against Russian invasion of Ukraine.
We have to stay together, because Putin has been counting on from the beginning. And somehow NATO would and the G7 would splinter, but we haven't, and we're not going to. So can't let this aggression take the form it has and get away with it.
French President Emmanuel Macron and Canadian Prime Minister are also present. The G7 consists of 7 leading economies of the world, namely Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, United Kingdom, and the United States. Germany took over the presidency just this year. Some other issues that are likely to be discussed are energy security, climate change, COVID-19 pandemic, and food security. For years, G7 has attracted protesters to its venue, and this year is no different. Some 1,500 people gathered to criticize governments for their inaction against climate change. This is an issue that is going to be widely discussed in the summit as well. This is an important issue, but has been more prominent since the Russia-Ukraine war. Climate activists had hoped that the war would be a silver lining for the environment. You see, at international stages like the COP26, these rich G7 countries made tall claims to lower emissions and adopt transition to renewable energy. So now, when this unusual opportunity came up, activists were optimistic that countries will cut their dependence on fossil fuels. But that's not what is happening. Rich countries are making a dash for fossil fuels. So as Russia continues to burn its own natural resources, Western countries are investing elsewhere for new coal, oil, and gas. They are either resurrecting old mines at home or approaching smaller countries to burn fossil fuel on their own behalf. For now, let's focus on a country that has been invited for the meeting but is not a member of the grouping, and that is India. Germany invited its close Asian ally. Washington says that New Delhi's presence on the table is crucial because its agenda is deep and diverse. This comes at the heels of the West and India's differing stance on the war. US and Europe have chosen to go the sanctions way, but India has chosen diplomacy. So will New Delhi's cameo in Germany affect its relations with Moscow? Well, G7 leaders say the aim is not to splinter the two allies. India has made it clear that even after the G7 meeting, New Delhi will continue to purchase crude oil from Moscow. While there are simmering tensions with the West, the Foreign Secretary says that India's regular participation in summits is an indication of acceptance. Well, as global leaders arrive in Germany for the 48th edition of the G7 summit, WION is on ground zero, getting you all the details and updates from the summit. Our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibbal, spoke with Sabina Wolf, political correspondent with German national television ARD. In this exclusive interview, they talk about India's importance in the functioning of global markets, the need of direct talks between leaders to tackle global supply chain crisis, and how energy and industries are important for India-Germany relationship. Take a look at this interview.
Germany is hosting the G7 summit. I'm at the International Media Center. With me is the political correspondent of ARD German television, Sabina Wolf. Ma'am, welcome to WION. My first question, obvious question is Germany hosting the G7 summit. What will be the key priorities in front of the German presidency?
So the absolute priority is a solution for Ukraine. The G7 leaders will discuss in depth what can be done. Will there be more sanctions? How can there be another reaction towards Russia to stop this aggression and to help Ukraine?
Mm-hmm. You have hosted the G7 summit in 2015. Germany has exactly the same spot, and that time the chancellor was a different chancellor, Angela Merkel. This time there is a different chancellor. So what do you see in terms of change in the policy action by the new chancellor?
Well, we have been discussing that because the whole crew has been here 7 years ago for the last G7 summit, and the problems were much more blunt. That means we are facing much more difficult problems today. We've seen the disruption of the supply chains. We've seen a shortage of basic goods. Even in Europe, where nobody ever thought that could be possible. We're facing now this war, which is happening in the middle of Europe. And so there is different problems we are facing today. We have the energy problem. So the gas supply is dramatically sinking here in Germany. So it's urgent problems that have to be solved, and this is all on the agenda.
Mm-hmm. All on the agenda, but the Indian Prime Minister also participating. How do you see the participation of countries like India and other countries at the summit at a time when we have seen increased engagement by the grouping with many countries, especially from the global south?
Well, I think that's very important. We have to open the global markets again. There's been so many barriers for international trade, and we need India, we need other countries, we need the global market to function. So it's very important that you are here, that India is here, and other countries that you mentioned. I think there has to be talk face to face. It's very important to talk. The leaders have to talk, and directly. And we need India for a lot of things. India needs us, and there's a lot of talk on energy. So I think it's very important that you're here and all the other countries as well.
Mm-hmm. But in terms of perhaps the inflation we have seen globally, the impact on the food prices, the impact on the commodity prices, the supply chain disruption, what do you think, I mean, in terms of, I'm not asking you to just tell the outcome, because that's difficult for all of us, but what do you crystal gaze in terms of those outcomes, in terms of dealing with the global inflation?
Well, I think there has to be found a solution to tackle the supply chain problems. There has to be a diversification. One supply chain is not enough. There has to be a new thinking. Open the world, open the markets, and to a lot of countries. So I think that's on the agenda. And then you can also solve, or with it comes along, that prices get more stability because the economy gets more stable and is not as disrupted as much as we see today. And I think that will be a top priority. And I could imagine that there will be outcomes after this summit. As
a political correspondent, how do you see the relationship between the two countries panning out? We saw last month the Indian Prime Minister was in Berlin. He's again in Germany in 2 months' time.
Well, there's a lot to talk about between India and Germany. This is concerning energy politics. This is concerning the IT industry. This is also concerning pharma. So there is a lot to talk about. And also India is a big country with a great future. And there needs to be a stable partnership, and it has to be put on a new basis, which is happening right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, ma'am, for speaking to WION. So that's the view from Germany about the summit and India-German relationship with video journalist Siddhant Sibbal for WION in Germany.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.